Right, waiting for the progress bar, preparing for live stream, start the meeting. We're about to be blasting off, so make sure you're all buckled up, arms, legs, appendages in the seat. I had a lot of coffee this morning, so I'm a bit awake right now. Cool, we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this wonderful morning or evening, wherever you are, in Design Systems 101, hosted by Design Buddies and Kick-Ass UX. So in case you guys are new to Design Buddies, I'm Grace. I founded Design Buddies in April 2020 to make some buddies in design. And since then, we have over almost 14,000 buddies in the Discord server. And we have a lot of events like this, also resources, a mentorship program, and a lot of resources and goodies and a really nice, wholesome community for y'all to participate in. So welcome to join us on Discord and follow us on any of our social media platforms. And we're super excited to have Ludovic and Colton today from Kick-Ass UX. Both of them are co-founders of Kick-Ass UX, and Kick-Ass UX is an education platform dedicated to help graphic designers transition to UX. You should also check out their Instagram, which will be linked in the chat as well, for a lot of great UX tips. And so previously, Ludovic was a senior UX designer at Smartsheet, where he designed product solutions and implemented mobile and desktop design systems from the ground up. Colton was a senior UX designer at Smartsheet as well, where he worked across the entire product. In the last 2 years, he focused on solving some of the most complex solutions for enterprise administration and program management. I'm also here with Jess and Nadia from our Design Buddies admin team. And throughout the last 2 minutes of this call, of this event, around 10:58 a.m. Pacific time, we will be taking a group photo in our Instagram wave that we do at every single Design Buddies event for Instagram story. And with that said, I'll open the floor to Colton and Ludovic.
All right, let's do this. Well, thank you, Grace, and thank you, Design Buddies, for hosting this event. We're thrilled to be here, and thank you, everyone, for joining. However many of you there are, it's just very humbling. Special shout out to everyone joining from outside the US, especially if it's Saturday night. That's pretty amazing to learn about design systems on a Saturday night. It's going to be great. So let's get started.
Our goal for this coming hour is to provide you as much value as possible. We'll share all we know about design systems, so that you can have a deeper understanding of what they are and how beneficial they can be for you as part of your design process. We've done our best to provide you with the knowledge and content you can start using right now to improve your design process, quality, and speed.
But before we dive in, let's introduce ourselves. This is me, Ludovic Delmas. I come from France and now live in Seattle. And on the left, it's me and my wife behind a puck face. She didn't want me to show her on camera. And to the right are Gary and Peach, two French bulldogs of both my parents and my parents-in-law. So wherever I go in the world, I have my little Frenchie waiting for me. I absolutely love this. And professionally, like you mentioned, Grace, before that, I was at Smartsheet, where I was a senior UX designer and implemented the first design system from the ground up, both for the mobile and the desktop team, as well as an entire overhaul of the mobile experience, desktop features, or entire new desktop products.
As for me, I'm Colton. I've been in the industry for over 7 years. During that time, I've designed dozens of products and features that have been used by millions of people. In my spare time, you'll find me hiking and backpacking with my wife, or spending time with our two cats, Murphy and Guru. And yes, Murphy is named after Murphy's Law. After getting into UX, we kept getting approached by people looking to learn how we broke our way into the field. We were especially approached by graphic and visual designers. We kept hearing the same 3 things. They were tired of dealing with client and stakeholder subjectivity. They were tired of pushing pixels around until their client or manager was happy. And they were tired of just making things pretty and actually want to make an impact. And that's why we decided to co-found Kick-Ass UX, a learning platform dedicated to helping graphic and visual designers become UXers who excel at overcoming subjectivity so they can make a big impact.
Absolutely. And so we decided to combine both of our unique ways of getting into UX and all of our professional knowledge into Kick-Ass UX. So we spent 2 years working on a 6-month program called UX UI Experts that will launch for early access in a few weeks. So if you're a graphic or visual designer and are interested, feel free to join our waitlist. We are only accepting 32 students, and because it's early access, it's half the price. So coming back around, what you're about to learn combines the design system knowledge that I acquired over the past few years and the teaching style that we've perfected at Kickass UX. So with that, let's fully get started. I first want to share a story of how design systems changed everything for me. Back in the days for group projects at school, I was always the one putting the slides together. And that's because I wanted to and kind of type A on that regard. And because after a while, people expected me to just do it. It looked really good. I was the slide guy and absolutely loved it. But then slowly my interest grew from this visual layer of just creating slides to actual interface design. And so I ditched Keynote and went for the Sketch app. And I started with the mobile app design many years before I became a UX designer. And I slowly gained confidence in my design abilities. And then a few years ago, while searching for sketch content on YouTube, I found an interesting video on Pablo Stanley's Sketch Together channel. That was back in the days when Pablo was a full-on designer. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with him and his latest videos, but now it seems like he's both a designer and a comedian. So that's quite an interesting combo there. But anyways, back in the day, that design system video blew my mind, really. I still remember it. And that was back in the days when the Sketch app was much more primitive than today. So that video really put the light on why my designs were inconsistent, slow to produce, and slow to update. And that really made me understand why I ended up with designs that never looked quite right. They lacked a coherent structure to hold them together. And so after Pablo's video, I started my first mini design system with everything came into place. Everything looked great from typography, spacing, color, because everything was designed up front. The end result was that my designs were much more cohesive. And it was almost like invisible glue tied everything together. And so my spacing strategy in that regard went from being, pretty much a guessing game to a grid where the components lined up automatically. And suddenly 48 pixels carried a meaning, 32, 16, etc., all had a purpose of their own. They were not just numbers thrown out there. And as a system, it really all made sense. So the result was a much more harmonious result than anything that I could do before. And on top of that, they were way faster to create and update. One symbol update and all the linked symbols update automatically. It's pretty much like magic. So I could create designs in a fraction of the time and they ended up looking gorgeous. I was like, wow, how exciting is that? And that's truly the end goal here, is being pixel perfect at crazy speed. And in UX design, because we were UX designers, we still are if we define ourselves this way, the system thinking helped me tremendously. I could create better designs faster. And when something needed to be updated or revised, which always happens, at least in UX, in the push of one button, hundreds of screens would instantly update. And it was pretty much like, yes, an unfair advantage. But design systems are more than just a series of components in Sketch or Figma.
So what is a design system? Before we define it, let's take a step back. Ask yourself, why are some products fun to use while others aren't? Why is it that some experiences feel consistent throughout while others feel like a mess? And finally, why is it that some experiences feel familiar and easy to use while others don't? As with almost everything in life, there isn't a silver bullet answer. A well-established design system can really shape how a user feels about a product. So back to the question, what is a design system? A design system is the single source of truth that centralizes a company's best practices, uniting teams to build products at scale. In other words, a design system is a communication toolkit. Let's look at an example to illustrate what a design system is more than just a series of components in a sketch file. Imagine two teams trying to successfully put a dresser together in the least amount of time possible. Both teams have the same pieces required to assemble the dresser. The only difference is that Team 1 has instructions explaining step by step how to assemble it, while Team 2 doesn't. I'm sure you've guessed which team will build the dresser the fastest. Team 1 has an unfair advantage. That detailed booklet is like the documentation for a design system. Having the pieces is not enough. Knowing how to put them together is just as important. While there are infinite ways to assemble the pieces, there's only one way to do it right. Without a design system, you'll end up wasting your time, end up with poor quality, and you won't be able to scale your efforts. On the other hand, a design system provides guidance about what to do, when you do it, and why. Think about a design system like the process of building the dresser. It's the instruction booklet and the pieces to put it together. The design system helps everyone on the product team to maximize quality and speed. It reduces the amount of questions teams have and provides them with the answers. In the tech world, design systems are an essential tool for companies to stay competitive and ahead of the pack. You can benefit from a design system whether you're in UX or in graphic design.
So then the next logical question is, what is it composed of? It's composed of four things: high-level articles, style guides, a component library, and documentation. So let's start with high-level articles. They are what you would see on a design team's blog. It contains things like interviews, case studies, events, and it can also be used to show the design team's culture and practices. Though this is worth noting that this is only true for only very well-established companies like Airbnb. So you don't need those for your personal projects. This is more of a company-wide initiative. It's almost a PR thing for some companies where it's used to attract talents and or even setting trends in the market. The second element of a design system are style guides. It contains visual language and brand identity guidelines like fonts, color, illustrations, communication style, voice and tone, etc. And they are created at three different levels: the brand, marketing, and the product level. So this is an example by Atlassian.design. It's public, any one of you guys can look at it. And this is their design system page. And as I just mentioned, it's broken down into these three chunks: brand, marketing, and product. And so this provides the right set of guidelines for each team. And this is an example of the product page displaying guidelines such as accessibility, color, grid, components, and much more. It helps the members of the team create a consistent product experience. The third element of a design system are component libraries. They live in design software like Sketch or Figma for the design team, and it lives in code for the devs. There needs to be a one-on-one relationship between the component living in the design software and the component built in code. A component library has many benefits. It makes developer handoff much easier. It reduces greatly the amount of unnecessary communication. So designers can spend more time designing and developers can spend more time coding. And finally, the last piece of a design system is the documentation. It provides relevant information for designers and developers. It tells the designers the what, when, why, and how to use a component. And it tells devs how to implement them. Think Google Material Design documentation, right? And this is what it looks like. So some of you are probably familiar with it. It's really a great resource, by the way, and we really invite you, if you haven't had the time, to really read through as much as you can from it. It's just a golden resource. So on screen is an example of documentation for card components. And each page content follows a similar structure where they describe usage, anatomy, behavior, action, theming, specs, etc. And material design is also great at providing do's and don'ts, because even if you have clear guidelines, it's very, very easy to miss something, especially when relying too heavily on text explanations. So do's and don'ts are a great visual way to understand a concept. So once again, design systems are composed of these four things: high-level articles, style guides, component library, and documentation. And this is how large teams that work across the globe produce consistent, high-quality experiences at scale. Speaking of consistency, users should have a similar experience across all touchpoints and know what to expect. Words, button placement, interactions, you name it. They should perform the same everywhere and carry the same meaning across the entire experience. Otherwise, bad things happen. And for that matter, even if you're in the same office, it's extremely hard to scale without a design system. So material design is how Google Seattle and Google Paris can produce consistent experiences at scale. And having a single source of truth is critical these days as we're all working remotely. It greatly reduces misinterpretations in the end. So this is an example of top navs from Gmail, Google Keep, and Google Drive. So keep in mind that these teams work in different cities, yet all three top navs are fairly consistent. It makes it easy for users of the Google Suite to navigate the interface from one product to another. It really provides clear expectations and lowers discoverability issues. So the left side shows which product you're in, Gmail, Keep, and Drive. The center part is consistently reserved for searching. And the right side is where users go to find profile-related options and other controls. This sets clear expectations for users, and in the UX, it's super important to the overall user experience. So well done, Google. So now there are many benefits to a design system. They help companies scale design practices, they promote higher quality products that can be built more rapidly, and they help users successfully achieve their goals. So what about the user in all this? Users are at the center of the creation of a design system, at least in UX design. Components and patterns must be understandable and usable. It reduces the cognitive load and promotes positive user experiences. For example, Google tested over 100 different text field versions to figure out which one was best. And text fields have a ton of moving parts. They seem simple like this, but they really aren't. They have labels, ghost text, and different styles for each state. And all of these states must meet user expectations. And on top of that, they must pass accessibility requirements, like color contrast, keyboard shortcuts, etc. So if you don't keep the user in mind, you will create the system subjectively. And if you don't include users as part of the decision-making process, it could lead to confusion, frustration, and ultimately lower the chances that they can successfully achieve their goals. So let me tell you how I helped the team at Smartsheet scale their design practice thanks to design system. In 2017, I was hired as a UX designer for the mobile team, and designing features was somewhat inefficient. Even the simplest screens, it was typical to have old and often outdated sketch files as a reference. We had to ask devs for font style, color, shadow, spacing, etc. And we even had to recreate interfaces from screenshots. So not ideal. So these practices were not holistic, consistent, or scalable. And it was slow, which drove me crazy. There was a huge opportunity to improve this process. So I started by building a design system for the mobile team, refreshed all of the iconography, consolidated the naming conventions, solidified color usage, and made sure that designers and devs were speaking the same language. So to do so, I created a style guide and a component library. Once that was done, I showed the mobile design system to the desktop team, and I was given 8 weeks to create the design system MVP. It's not a lot of time for such a large product. So before creating anything at all, I needed a high-level understanding of the pattern and component usage. So to put this in perspective, out of the 8 weeks that I was given, the categorization alone took a full month. Then 4 weeks in, I could finally start building the first components. I started by taking an inventory of our component and patterns. This required lots of detailed work to ensure that each category was defined correctly, from small to large components. And all of this was just done in a spreadsheet, by the way. You don't need anything fancy at this point. I started by listing the parent categories like buttons, for example, and then all the sub-elements like primary, secondary, etc. To get there, I had to take dozens of screenshots and I had to analyze them and categorize them for all parts of our product. It's very, very tedious. And after 4 weeks of doing this, I finally had an exhaustive list of the majority of UI components. The resulting list were things like avatars, buttons, input field, labels. And on top of categorizing elements, I also had to define all states of a component: resting, hover, selected, error, and warning states, for example. Then I had to figure out if these states could be applied broadly or if they broke in some scenarios. All in all, once it was done, it really combined all the knowledge that used to live in disparate locations, and it really became the single source of truth. This helped the team in many ways. They experienced faster workflows while increasing the quality of work. They had less questions about what component to use or which color is the latest, etc. And they could pay more attention to solving user problems instead of pushing pixels. So with that, let's get practical. Colton.
So the question is, how can they help you as part of your design process? What benefit can you get out of them? Let's take a step back and look at the UX process. This is how we at Kickass UX define it. First, there is research and understanding, where you uncover insights by deeply understanding your users. Second, there's information architecture and wireframing, where you use the research insights to generate as many solutions as possible. You quickly ideate using lo-fi methods. Third, there's prototyping and usability testing, where you take your lo-fi concepts to the next level of iteration, prototype the experience, and get user feedback. And finally, there's visual design and handoff, where you make the designs pixel perfect and hand them off to developers. Anyway, let's imagine that you have a clear understanding of the business and user problems, that you've created low fidelity wireframes and usably tested these wireframes using a lo-fi prototype. Now that you have an idea of what works and what doesn't from an information architecture standpoint, it's time to increase the fidelity of your designs so you can build a more realistic prototype. This is the perfect time to implement a component library. Like we talked about earlier, design systems are composed of various deliverables such as high-level educational articles, style guides, a component library, and corresponding documentation. Creating a style guide and a small set of components can be extremely valuable in building a high-fidelity designs in little time. While the style guide and component library may take some time to set up, they will pay dividends in the end. Once built, creating high-fidelity designs is like playing Legos. It's plug and play. When establishing your design system, always start with the basics. Let's look at the steps to build your mini design system composed of a style guide and a component library. Step 1, put together your style guide by establishing your typography, color, shadows, and spacing. Step 2, using your style guide, start creating the smallest components, otherwise referred to as atoms, such as buttons, labels, tokens, etc. Step 3, create larger components referred to as molecules made of several atoms. An example of a molecule could be a card component with an image, a header, body text, and a button. Step 4, create even larger components, otherwise referred to as organisms, such as panels, top navs, etc. Let's dive deeper into step 1, where you establish your style guide. It's really risky if you don't define your typographic styles up front. The first risk is that you'll produce inconsistent designs. Second, your typographic hierarchy might suffer from font sizes that look too close in size to one another. Finally, you might end up using too many font styles. While it might feel frustrating to restrict yourself to a set number of fonts, it's actually a good thing because it forces you to do more with less. This makes your designs easier to consume and more consistent. Well-designed products use a minimal set of fonts to create user interfaces. Here's an example from Google Drive. It's super clean. The small number of font sizes makes the information easier to consume. How many font sizes do you think there are in this highlighted area? Any guesses? Yes, there's only one. Thank you. It's
Wow,
13.
only one.
Yeah, it's
Unbelievable.
13 pixels. The nuances that you perceive are due to text styling, such as font color, weight, and letter casing. There are also two different fonts in this area. The grayish text is Roboto, while the blue Buy Storage button is Google Sans. The main point is that there's only one font size. Does that help the comprehension of the user interface? Absolutely. The critical typography lesson here is that the majority of Google Drive's interface is built using only one font size. In typography, less is more. There are only 5 font sizes in Google Drive's example: 13, 14, 16, 18, and 22. This leads us to a handy guideline to remember when setting up your typography in your style guide. It's called the 4+2 rule. What does it stand for? 4 essential fonts and 2 occasional fonts. What that means is that most of the time you only use 4 font sizes. When needed, you can add 2 more font sizes to the mix. Of course, remember that this is not a hard and fast rule. For your own designs, here are 6 font sizes you can use: 14, 16, 24, and 32, with occasional font sizes of 12 and 48. Finally, set the font weights. Material Design's type system is a great resource to get a better idea of a well-established type ramp. Once you've set up typography, now you want to do the same thing with color, and make sure that each color has a meaning. It's all about conveying feelings, which is why picking colors can be a tricky process. You can go to color.adobe.com or use Material Design's color tool to help pick out your color scheme.
Are we frozen?
Are you guys still there?
Oh, okay. Well, technical issues. We'll be back as soon as we can.
Grace, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
All right. Where's Is Colton frozen?
Yeah, his screen is black for me. Technical issues. We'll be back as soon as we can.
Well, I can keep going. Otherwise, it's completely fine. And then you will get back pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do that then.
Yeah.
So when picking color, it's super important not to use the use case and not the color itself. So in this case, right, it's a blue color. You don't want to call it blue. You want to call it primary, because this is evergreen, right? If the brand's color changes over time, let's say your brand color goes from pink to blue, then if you called it blue, you would have to redo a bunch of work, while primary would always stay the same, regardless of whatever color you end up moving to. Then the other thing to keep in mind is accessibility, right? That this is absolutely important in UX design, at least, where you need to meet accessible criteria, which means the text color has to have enough contrast against your background color. So in order to do this, there is a tool called WebAIM, which is a color contrast tool to check your colors and make sure that they meet accessibility guidelines. There are also plugins both in Sketch and Figma that help you figure this out on the fly. So please ensure your text is accessible so everyone can use your product. Next, create your shadow styles. So shadows show surfaces at different elevation and can help highlight certain elements. Overuse of shadows can create confusions and muddy your designs. It's really all about using them to stay tastefully and at the right dose, right? And And so we usually don't use more than 3 shadow styles, a bit like, remember we said for typography that less is more. It's a bit the same here for shadows, where less is more, in the sense that as soon as you go over 3 or 4 or 5, it starts to be muddied. So these provide different elevations and provide focus for UI elements. When creating shadow styles, think about which direction you want the light to hit each element. And it's important to make each shadow feel consistent. Typically, what we see in UI design is a 45-degree angle, or coming straight from the top at a 90-degree angle. These are the 2 most common ones. And finally, establish a spacing strategy. Apply consistent spacing across elements in your design. So for example, you might decide that between a header and the element below it, there is always 32. And if that's the rule, then like you would follow it across, so that the 32 pixel has a very specific meaning and it feels harmonious in the entirety of the product.
And Ludovic, I'm back. Sorry, my internet completely dropped on me. Where I was like,
all right,
I thought
I'm back. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah. The panic moment. We recommend using the 8-point grid system. It's well documented, and you can find lots of beneficial resources on the web, including Google Materials Design spacing methods. We also have some resources on our website, Kickass UX, for the 8-point grid system as well. Once you've set up your typography, colors, shadows, and spacing in your design software of choice, you've created your style guide. Woohoo! This brings us to step 2, creating your atoms. This is based on Brad Frost's atomic design methodology. Atoms are the basic building blocks of matter. In the same way, atoms are the basic building blocks of your UI. That means that you'll use the styles that you've just put together to build small components like buttons, input fields, etc. in your design software of choice. These small components are what you'll use inside most mid to large size components. For example, let's look at Airbnb and the search results for their stays. More specifically, let's look at one of the cards. Coming back to the definition of atoms as the basic building blocks of UI. How many atoms do you see? Any guesses? There are 7 atoms here. We don't count text as atoms. Think about it as what can be built into reusable components. You don't want to create a bunch of different text atoms, because it would constrain you and end up being really confusing for you when you're trying to actually use it. Plus, you have styles defined for your text elsewhere. Text can be inside of an atom, but it doesn't make an atom by itself. Similarly, pictures aren't atoms. They can be inside of atoms, but they don't make an atom themselves. And there's an exception to that, and that is if you have specific sizing that you have defined for pictures and it needs to be a certain size every single time, then you can consider it to be an atom. But in general, pictures aren't atoms. So once you've set up your atoms, step 3 is about creating larger components referred to as molecules. But first, a dad joke, and I'm proud of this one because I made it up. What's the name of the Greek god of small particles? Molecules.
That joke, classic.
Yeah. Molecules are composed of several atoms. An example of this could be a card that contains an image with a header, body text, and a button. Whatever molecules you come up with, just remember that they must be made of several atoms. Coming back to the Airbnb example, we can then take the atoms and the picture and the text elements and combine them into 2 separate molecules. Finally, in step 4, you set up your organisms. These are the largest components that exist and are made of several molecules. Examples of organisms are modals, top navs, etc. Modals are made of a header, content, and a footer. I'm sure you saw this coming, but here you can see we combine the 2 separate molecules we made earlier into one organism. And I think I saw a chat come up earlier about this, but so I'll talk about that now. You could set up your card in such a way where the entire card itself is made like is just an atom or sorry, a molecule, excuse me. You could set it up that way, but like realistically, to be more holistic with your design and more flexible, you'd probably want to set it up as two separate molecules.
Mhm.
So let's see. Building your components usually without a design system in place, the larger component is, the more prone it is to mistakes and inconsistencies. Building your components using a design system will increase your design's quality. Also, because the library is built using nested symbols, any changes will be much faster because a single update will automatically change all of your linked symbols. Imagine that your prototype is made of 30 screens and that you learn that the placement of your primary button wasn't noticeable enough. Without working with nested symbols, you'll have to update 30 screens manually. Aside from being slow, it's likely you'll make mistakes. Element placement could be right on some screens and wrong on others. These 4 steps will help you build a mini design system for your project, enabling you to design higher quality designs in a fraction of the time. Using this approach to design will keep you organized and give you an unfair advantage over other designers who create each screen separately without the help of a library. Thanks to a well-established system, you'll be able to focus on solving user problems, regain control over your designs, and stop frantically pushing pixels. Before the recap, I just want to point out that all of the slides during this presentation have been built using the Kick-Ass UX style guide and a component library. The result is consistent, reflects our brand, and only took a small amount of time to put together. That's the power of a design system in action.
So to recap, we talked about design systems, what they are. We discussed the composition of a design system, high-level articles, style guide, component library, and documentation. We talked about the benefits of using them as part of your workflow. And finally, we covered the 4 steps to put a design system together.
Yeah, thank you all for your time. We hope that you got a lot of value out of this session. If you have any further questions about design systems or UX, you can contact us through our website, kickassux.com, or DM us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And of course, we'd like to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And your slides are beautiful. So many people loved it in the chat as well. Yeah, I also have a design system built for my slides because I love design systems as well. So we'll be unmuting people for Q&A. If you want to be unmuted and be on TV to ask your question, raise your hand on Zoom. If you don't know how to raise your hand, just privately DM me on Zoom. Otherwise, you're welcome to ask your questions in the chat as well. If you asked it earlier, please copy pasta, edit it again, and we'll be kind of doing both. Cool. Q&A time, buddies. And then in about 20 minutes or so, a little less than like about 18 minutes or 14 minutes, or I can't do math, but 2 minutes before the ending time, we will be taking a group photo. So, and a group wave if you guys came later for our Instagram story. So make sure to stay for that as well.
I see an interesting question in the chat actually from Vitor, if I don't want to misspell your name. Hey guys, congrats for this initiative. How do you keep room for flexibility and creativity? That's a really good question. And you have to think of a design system almost like as a flexible dictatorship where, let me explain. So it has to be very strict, right? Because if it's not, then you end up having a overall product that doesn't feel right from one end to another. So there is to be a very strict guideline as to what you are allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use. Yet there are times when the design system doesn't have the right component, or the component is not sufficient for this specific use case. So in which case, then the designer will have to go to the design system team and discuss the problem that they're having and how the current components don't meet that use case. And then in that conversations, many things can happen, and they can tell you to design it in a way that works with current components, and you might have to have a lot of conversation and back and forth with them to figure this out. And otherwise, they might have to create new components for that specific use case. So in that case, you as a designer would have helped the design system team to create another pattern, another component.
And to add to that a little bit, that's why it's really important to define your typography and colors and shadows and all of those basics up front in your style guide. Because if you have those things already figured out, then it's relatively easy to start adding those to other places. But again, like, you're going to want to do it in a way that's consistent across everything that you're doing. And so that allows for you to be more flexible, but then also, have that kind of design dictatorship in place so that it doesn't get out of hand, because it's so easy for things to get out of hand. And to put this in perspective, when I first joined Smartsheet, we did an inventory on colors, and this was before we had much of a design team. And so most things were created by developers. And I'm probably get the number wrong, but I want to say we found hundreds of different grays separately, just like ever so slightly off grays, that we had to go and fix. And so it's so easy if you don't have these things set up in one place that it can get out of control.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. We have a lot of questions. So if any of you see any question you want to answer, feel free to jump away. Otherwise, I'll try to go in order.
Let's do this, yep.
Yeah. There was one I saw interesting. So Thomas asked, I have already designed a website without using a design system. Would it be worth it to redesign all the pages of your design system? I'm assuming this also depends on what the product is and whether you need to scale and stuff, but how would you recommend people kind of coming in mid-product and while they're doing the website, and how to start design system from there?
I think you already kind of nailed it on the head with it depends, right? If this is for your personal portfolio, I do recommend a design system for that, by the way. Then I don't know if it's necessary. If you've already done everything and everything's fairly consistent, then that sounds like a lot of work for not a lot of gain. But if it is for a product that you are creating, then it might be worth your time. It depends on how far you're taking this. If this is something that's going to sit there, or if this is something that's actually going to be continually be updated and keep growing. Because if it's something that's going to keep growing or to keep using it, then you need to create a design system. So for example, all of we built our entire design system up front for our slides. And then when we realized we needed to change things, we just changed them there and then went updated our slides across the board, because it made it that much easier for us. And had we not done that up front, we would have been hosed. But the thing is because we reused it over and over. That's the way you have to think about it, is how much are you reusing this?
Yep. And it's a 6-month-long program and we have hundreds of slides. So can you imagine going one by one? No.
It's actually more like thousands and thousands at this point.
Yes, absolutely. But they look pretty, at least.
Yeah.
I see a really good question that I really, really want to answer by Svetlana. And so you mentioned subjectivity in the beginning. What are some ways to tackle client subjectivity in assessing designers' work? Wow, that question just so good, because this always happens, right? And this is one of the main reasons why graphic designers that we've talked to, and we've talked to a lot, end up losing passion for graphic design as a career, is because of that subjectivity, and because clients come in and all of a sudden throw that they don't like it, or that they are underwhelmed, or many other things can come out of these meetings. And so the key with subjectivity, if you're referring to it as part of graphic design, would be, our recommendation would be to really set the tone up front and not show the final hi-fi design at the end, but instead think of the design more as a collaborative effort, right? Where you first briefly introduce all kind of different ideas that you could be moving forward with, see which one resonates most with them, instead of creating a full-on design system up front, create a small one and see if that resonates with them or not, right? And the earlier you can move these discussions, instead of at the end when you've done all the work, the better, because that way you won't have to redo all of that work. And instead of being in I like, I don't like, you will be building together. So that's a great way to get around this.
Some other strategies as well for tackling subjectivity is shifting language usage, because a lot of times this is in meetings and whatnot, and a stakeholder or a client will be like, I don't like that, or this doesn't work for me, or this, there's something about it that they don't like, and it's about preference, and you want to shift the conversation away from preference and towards functionality in terms of, and so if they say like, I don't like that, and so what you say back is, oh, what about that doesn't work to you? Like, is there something about that doesn't work? Because then they'll start to realize, oh, I'm stating my personal preference. This has nothing to do with how this thing actually behaves. So that's one thing. Another one, and this is why I think UX is blown up, is the fact that we base everything, or we should be basing everything, on users, right? And so we have like data to back us up. And so the thing that you should always be thinking about is, how can I back up my design decisions? Like, what do I need to show people that will convince them that I made the right call? And so like every decision that you make along the way, highly recommend like writing down somewhere, even in Sketch or Figma, whatever you're using, like why you decided on one thing over another. Like that sort of thing can really help, because if they ever bring up, oh, why didn't you do this? You'd be like, well, I did, and it wasn't awesome, and here's why. So, I mean, there's much more to it. A great resource is Articulating Design Decisions by Tom Griever. Highly recommend that book.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So we have Oscar who raised his hand, so I'm going to unmute.
Hi, I'm Oscar.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, how would you create systems with developers in mind? I mean, what data should they be given, especially for the responsive products, and how to take the screen scalings into account?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a bit the same answer I'm going to give you here is involve developers as early as possible in the process. And the reason being is that if you design your design system in Sketch without them in mind, then you might design the most beautiful components and component library and whatnot. Yet you might be confronted to discussions later on with devs where they tell you that doesn't work because of legacy code, and we cannot do this because it would take way too much time to do this, and things just jump at you, and then all the design effort that you've done could be wasted, right? So the key is to once again think of it as a collaboration with them, involve them to make sure that as we move forward, they can also set resources for their own teams, because it's a full-on effort on their end as well, and they need to think ahead of the coming month. And so involving them early so they understand, so you understand the boundaries as a designer, and involve them early also so that they can put on the resources and start hiring the right people for that team.
So go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Oscar.
Thanks. The biggest problem for me is using pixels, because I know that's the issue. They probably don't use, fixed widths for the margins and stuff. I thought about using font scaling and RAM and EN. What do you think about this approach to give them information in this format?
So
actually, go ahead, Colton.
So I think there's a couple things to touch on there. So first, I think it's really important that you design for breakpoints up front, right? And so Google Material Design, they've already done the work for you to figure out where a lot of the breakpoints are that you're gonna have to worry about. And they've also defined the responsive layout grid. And so you can point developers to them and say, we want to follow them because they're creating the best practices. So that's one thing you can do. And you also, if they're not willing to do that, you could recreate it yourself, showing kind of how it works. So that's one thing that you could do for how you get things to resize properly, and you have in a certain number of columns or whatever you're using to make sure that everything kind of scales properly. In terms of REM and whatnot, that can get tricky because that it puts a lot of work on you and on them to test everything to make sure everything works properly, which is why a lot of people use fixed type sizes, and then at certain breakpoints, they'll drop them. And so it'll be on you to kind of test them out and find out where I need to be dropping the type sizes. And so like on desktop, your type ramp is going to be bigger than on mobile, right? And same with tablet.
Yeah.
And so you're going to want to go through and create your type ramp with those in mind, and then like bring it, drop it depending on the different sizes you are. And so you'll need to call that out for them. And so like when I was helping to build out our responsive side at Smartsheet, like we built out a full column section, like the columns, and showed how everything worked at every size and what to expect from each of these things. And then the last thing to talk about is like make sure that they're using a software that pairs up your components with the code so that you have the same exact naming conventions and that everything is a 1-to-1 ratio from whatever you're using in Figma, Sketch, whatever, to what they're using. And so like Storybook is what we've used previously for developers.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome, thank you. We'll take one or two more questions. So Sarah, I'm going to unmute you and then we'll take a group photo afterwards. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I think everyone's on Discord, so feel free to join the conversation on there as well. So.
Yeah, I think you actually just kind of touched on my question, piggybacking on Oscar's there. What, other than Storyboard, have you used trying to, create those design systems for developers? I'm pretty familiar with Zeppelin, but is there anything else that you prefer, and any best practices there?
Yeah, so it really depends on your team and the tools that you use, right? If you use Figma, then you have all-in-one tool, the way for designer to design and for developers to go and look at the specifications. Yet when you look at Google Material Design, you will see that when they dedicate a page to, for example, cards that we just looked at, right? So there is the page for the designers that really tells them the specifics they need to know as designers. And if you go to the exact same page, but for developers, it's a totally different page. It has nothing to do with that, and it's very developer specific. So when you think of this and all the explanations that are in these pages, there are a lot of things in there that help each respective members in the teams understand how to move forward. And so documentation is one major way. At the spec level, like I said, right, it could be Figma. You could be using Sketch plus Zeppelin, which is a great way to do it. If you later on in the process, then the next one would be to think of, like we mentioned, Storybook, because as it's being built by the developer, then you as a designer can go in and actually interact with the component live to see if, let's say you enter a lot of text, does it break? Does it still look fine? Are the margins still good? So how does it behave, right? Beyond just the static screen in a design software. And so that helps to merge the gap, but that's more once that it has been implemented in that sandbox, in that Storybook sandbox.
And we're most familiar with Zeppelin because we have been using Sketch primarily for the last while. And so we would put everything up in Zeppelin, and then devs would be using Storybook to connect those.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, we have time for one more.
Awesome.
Is there anyone you want to ask? Otherwise, I have one.
You go for it.
Okay, cool. This is one Joanne asked a while ago about how to, let me just find it again. How any recommendations to improving accessibility, like working with researchers or using Figma plugins or Sketch plugins or plugins in this case, to just improve accessibility?
So is it specifically about plugins or just how to?
How to, like working with researchers or anything, any thoughts you have?
Yeah, I mean, the very first thing is educate yourself. There's a lot of places online you can learn about accessibility. On Sketch, they have Stark, which I think is a free plugin for accessibility. And then there's Contrast, which is a free one on Figma that you can use. Always be checking those things out. For example, like, for graphical elements like icons, it should be a 3-to-1 ratio. For text, bare minimum 4.5 to 1 ratio. You don't have to hit AAA standards unless you're a very specific type of company. Like when we're at Smartsheet, it's almost, and this is a blanket statement, but it's really hard to make things look really good when you're using whatever is the recommended, which I think is 7-to-1 to hit AAA standards. And so like we aim for 4 to 5 to 1 for our text. So yeah, just learn about the standards for visual. And then when you're done with that, that's like baseline. The second step is like, how does this actually apply to, listening and, people who can't see and whatnot. And so then there'll be another research rabbit hole of learning more about that and kind of how you apply it. The tricky thing that I have found in my career is getting that translated for developers, like having them put that in. Like, luckily the browser does a lot of that for us, but there's definitely a lot of things that you have to specify to them. And so like one of the biggest tips that I could give any new UX designer is build relationships across the team, and especially with developers. Like, you want to be friends at the end of the day, because if they like you, they're more willing to follow through and like work with you on this sort of thing, versus like throwing things over the fence. And so like, this is one of those opportunities to partner with them and learn and apply the right accessibility guidelines.
Awesome. Thank you. Definitely collaborating with people on your team, building relationship is also always great. That said, we're going to build a relationship within our community and take a group photo.
Awesome.
Nice segue. So I'm going to count down for blast off. We take a group photo, and afterwards you'll take a wave. So you can dance, you can dab, you can wave, you can bring your plushies. Feel free to bring your plushies or pets to the photo as well. This will be shared on our social media in the announcements this week or next week, and also on our Instagram story. So make sure to follow us on Instagram to check that out. And I'll count down 10 seconds for y'all to turn on your camera. And also make sure to connect with KCAS UX and also Design Buddies on the social media, join the community. All right, 10, 9, bring your plushies, whatever you want. I'm gonna bring, I think I'm gonna bring Pusheen today.
If my cats were around, I would snag one, but they're not here.
Oh no, okay. All right, well, you can like be a funny photo, it can be serious, whatever you want, whatever you vibe with. So where was I? 7, 6, 5. Oh, there's multiple pages, so keep smiling until I say done. 4, 3, 2, 1. And after that, I'm going to do a wave. All right. Ready, set, cheese, say cheese. All right. Or you can dab, you can wave, you can smile, you can wave your stuffed animal up and down. This will be a video for our Instagram story, and also on Twitter as well. Ready, set, wave. Woo, hello buddies. We are at Design Systems 101. We are so excited to learn about design systems on this wonderful Saturday morning. Make sure to join us on Discord, and thank you very much. All right, cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This concludes our event. If Ludovic and Colton can stay on for 5 minutes for a quick debrief, that'll be great. If that, everyone is free to go and enjoy your Saturday. And as always, stay positive and test negative.
I love it.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to post this on our story before it forgets.
What a conclusion.
I always do that. It's the Rona.
I
call it the Rona.
That's good.
It's more of a ring to it.
Well, yeah, that was a terrible time to drop my internet to go out. I ran
like,
around the house.
Where's
No
Colton?
worries.
Yeah. Yeah. It just like went down, and then everything just like, no.
That was fine. Yeah. At some point, I was like, well, is it everyone or is it just Colton?
No, just me.
It was all good. All good.
I'm posting in our story. I thought of doing the waving thing just really, really randomly one time halfway through an event, and I just continued doing that.
That was nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Great questions.
All right, it is posted. Now people can check us out. All right, so we have 20 people left. This concludes our event. Don't want to kick you out, but
But yes.
Yeah, this always happens. Like sometimes people are like AFK.
See you, Oscar.
Hi everyone. I usually put people in the waiting room because I feel bad kicking people out. It's like you're trying to like close like a restaurant and like there's like people still in there and stuff. So this is like our virtual space.
Almost.
Almost there. All right. If the
Did you want to stop on YouTube? I think it's still live.
thanks. Thank you. I'll edit this out as well
Cool.
when I save the video.